Hello from Kingfisher, Oklahoma. Today we're going to look at 1 Kings 17 and 18. Now, King Ahab is on the throne, and we find that he's very evil. He's more evil than any of the other kings before him. He gets a super bad grade in the grade of kings. Just awful. So, God raises up a prophet, Elijah, and he is going to speak against King Ahab and be kind of the foil to this bad thing. And Elijah's going to stand up for God and for truth. So Elijah comes out by word of the Lord and says, there's going to be no rain for years. I'm going to pray. There will be no rain. And sure enough, it happens. Well, God says, you got to go. And so he sends him out into the wilderness. There's a creek there, or stream or brook, whatever the size is. And Elijah stays there, and he's drinking the water, and every day the ravens are bringing him food. Now, if you want to think about, man, I don't even know where I'm going to get a meal, think about this. God sent manna for the children of Israel out of heaven, and quail at one point, right? He's feeding Elijah by the ravens. And if you want an inspiring story about someone whose prayer life is great, who's close to God, and God always feeds, look up George Mueller. So as long as you're following God, there's no reason to think that you should ever run out of food or water to drink, right? Water from a rock. God could still do the same thing today. So have some faith there. Then Elijah, after the brook dries up, goes out and lives with a widow, and she gets fed as long as Elijah's there. Her and her son are going to fix the last meal before they die, but God provides miraculously the whole time Elijah is there, and they have food. Now, a little faith testing comes in for this widow because she thinks she's going to die, and her son, because they'll run out of food, but God provides. But her son still dies. Test of faith. Well, God allows Elijah to perform a miracle and bring the son back to life. You know, for a widow back in those days, having a son was like having a future, and having no son, it was like, I'm a widow, no husband, now no son. Who's going to take care of me? Well, God is always the one that takes care. And he brings her son back. Now, then we get into one of the most famous stories of the Bible. God says it's time, sends Elijah to go find Ahab, and he has this giant prophetic showdown. Now, this is incredible. I don't know. I'd like to think I have as much faith to be able to stand up against 850 prophets. You know, no matter who's standing against me, I'll stand firm for God. But this is pretty incredible. Elijah is in this prophetic showdown. It's just him representing Yahweh God. And you have 850 who are of various false gods. And they're going to have the showdown. Whichever God answers by fire from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, is the real God. And this is a showdown to let Israel know who the real God is. Who are you going to serve? The real God. Well, who is it? Who are we going to choose? Which is pretty crazy that they've already forgotten. But anyway, so in this showdown, the prophets go out. They do all sorts of things. They cry out. They cut themselves. They're out there all day. They're shouting. They're screaming. They're dancing. They're doing all the things. Nada. Nothing. And aside from a little mocking from Elijah, they get nothing. Then Elijah sets up the altar, just as he would, and puts an offering on there. And he asks them to douse with a lot of water the offering. And he digs a trench, and there's all this water running everywhere. It's a lot of water, people. And he starts to pray to God. Fire from heaven consumes the sacrifice, the wet wood, all the water that's in the trench, and even the rocks. That's incredible. Who's the real God? Yahweh. Now, if you're reading through this Bible, that shouldn't surprise you that Yahweh is the real God. But it really showed it to them. So Elijah asked the people, catch the prophets, and they slaughter them all right there and say, it's time to serve God. And then he prays for rain, and after 3.5 years, God sends the rain. He's really trying to get the people's attention. If you listen for God and he can have your attention, maybe he won't have to send a 3.5 year drought to the land to get it. But he may have to do what he has to do if America's not going to listen. But the true story is God is glorious, powerful, and mighty. Let's follow him. Okay, we're going to jump in now. Chapter 17. Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew or rain these years, but according to my word. And the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Get thee hence, turn eastward, hide thyself by the brook of Cherith, that is before the Jordan. And it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. And he went and did according to the word of the Lord, and he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning. So he got bread and meat. And the bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. Came to pass after a while that the brook dried up, because there was no rain in the land. Makes sense. The word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon. And I send him to a foreign country, and dwell there. Behold, I commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. And he rose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there, gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. And she said, As the Lord God liveth, I have not a cake, but just a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I'm gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in, dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. So she's given up. Elijah said to her, Fear not. Go and do as thou hast said, but make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it to me, and after that make a cake for thee and thy son. Faith testing right there. She said, Well, there's only enough for the 2 of us. And he said, Make me one first, and then you can eat. So in essence, he's asking them to share, so it would seem to the human mind. For thus saith the Lord of Israel, The barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fall, until the day of the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. She went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and she and he and her house did eat for many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. Success. The faith worked. And it came to pass after these things that the son of the woman of the mistress of the house fell sick. And his sickness was so sore, and there was no breath left in him. And she said unto Elijah, What have I to do with thee, O man of God? Art thou come to me to call my sin to remembrance, and slay my son? And he said to her, Give me thy son. And he took her out of her bosom, and carried him up to the loft where he abode, and laid him on his bed. And he cried to the Lord, O Lord God, hast thou brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourned, by slaying her son? And he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and cried to the Lord, saying, O Lord my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again. The Lord heard the voice of Elijah. The soul of the child had come into him again, and he revived. And Elijah took the child, and brought him down out of the chamber into the house, and delivered him unto his mother. And Elijah said, See, thy son liveth. And the woman said to Elijah, Now I know that thou art the man of God, and that the word of the Lord is in thy mouth, and it is truth. Pretty awesome story. That's a miracle. Chapter 18. And it came to pass after many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. And Elijah went to show himself unto Ahab. And there was a sore famine in Samaria, and Ahab called Obadiah, who was the governor of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. For it was so, when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah took 100 prophets, and hid them by 50 in a cave, and fed them with bread and water. So God always keeps a remnant of his people. When we think we're the only one, we're not. There's 100 prophets still out there with Elijah. They're in hiding, but they're there. Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go to the land and all the fountains of water and all the brooks. Peradventure we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, that we lose not all the beasts." So they divided the land between them to pass throughout it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went the other way by himself. That's pretty intense that they're looking for that as king, and why doesn't he have someone else looking for it? But anyway, and as Obadiah was in the way, behold, Elijah met him, and he knew him and fell on his face and says, "Art thou that my lord Elijah?" And he answered and said, "I am. Go tell thy lord, behold, Elijah is here." And he said, "What have I sinned, that thou wouldst deliver thy servant into Ahab to slay me? As the Lord thy God liveth, there is no nation or kingdom whither the Lord hath not sent to seek thee." When my lord, the king, is who he's talking about. And when they said, "He's not here," he took an oath of the kingdom and nation, and that they found thee not. "Behold, thou sayest, Go tell thy lord, behold, Elijah is here." So Ahab, on the fact that there's no rain, wants to kill Elijah, and he's searching everywhere for him. "Behold, thou sayest, Go tell thy lord, Elijah is here. It shall come to pass, as soon as I am gone from thee, that the Spirit of the Lord will carry thee, whither I know not. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he cannot find me, he shall slay me. But I, thy servant, fear the Lord from my youth. Was it not told, my lord, what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 of them in the Lord's prophets by 50 in a cave, and fed them with bread and water? And now thou sayest, Go, tell thy lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he shall slay me. Elijah said, As the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. And it came to pass, when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house. And they have forsaken all the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. And therefore go and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table. The showdown. So Ahab sent all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together unto Mount Carmel. And Elijah said to all the people, How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. But if Baal be God, then follow him. The people answered not a word. They're just going to wait and see what happens. Who's going to come out on top? Yeesh. Yikes. Then Elijah said unto the people, I, even only I, remain a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let them therefore give us 2 bullocks. Let them choose 1 bullock for themselves and cut it into pieces. Lay it on the wood, put no fire under it, and I will dress the other bullock, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire under. And call upon the name of your gods, and I will call upon the name of the Lord, and the God that answereth by fire, let him be God. And all the people answered and said, It is well spoken. And Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, Choose you 1 bullock for yourselves, and dress it first. For ye are many, and call upon the name of your gods, and put no fire under it. And they took the bullock which was given to them, and they dressed it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, because he's not real, nor any that answered. And they leaped on the altar which was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, Cry aloud, for he's a god. Either he's talking, or he's pursuing, or he's on a journey, or peradventure he's sleeping and must be awakened. Elijah's throwing down the gauntlet here. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their manner with knives and lancets till the blood gushed out on them. And it came to pass when midday was past, and they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. And there was neither voice, nor any answer, nor any that regarded. So, tough luck, kids. Baal's not real. Elijah said to all the people, Come near me. And all the people came near him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar with the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar, as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order and cut the bullock into pieces and laid him on the wood. And said, fill 4 barrels with water and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. And he said, do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time. And the water ran about the altar. And he filled the trench also with water. So it is very wet. There's no way that fire is just going to light this thing, right? It came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I've done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that thou art God, and thou hast turned their heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell, consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up all the water that was in the trench. And all the people saw it. Now this is the proper response. And then fell on their faces in worship, basically. And they said, O Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. And Elijah said to them, take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they took them. And Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. So now they've turned back to God. For now. And Elijah said unto Ahab, get thee up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of abundance of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. And Elijah went to the top of Mount Carmel and cast himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees. And said to his servant, go up, look towards the sea. And he went up and looked, and he said, there is nothing. And he said, go again, 7 times. It came to pass on the 7th time that he said, behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea, like a man's hand. And he said, go up and say to Ahab, prepare thy chariot, and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. And it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So, monumental day. Fire of sacrifice from the Lord. The drought is over, and Elijah runs in front of a chariot all the way to Jezreel. That's serious running. So, God's miraculous. God is awesome. And this is the same God today. He could do all these things today. I think we just don't turn to him in the same kind of faith that Elijah did. And he's a man, the New Testament says, just like us. He wasn't God. He wasn't an angel. So we could have the same prayer life that he has. We could have the same ministry that Elijah has. Some food for thought. Well, thanks for joining us. Let's see what else happens to the prophet Elijah and King Ahab. We'll catch you next time.